right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Beyond the Hire podcast. Beyond the Hire, we dive into recruiting for the go-to-market space, what it takes to build winning teams, and how industry leaders got to where they are today. I am joined by Drew Sechrist today, and I just realized I did not confirm how I pronounce your last name. So I'm very curious if I did that
You're
correctly or
close.
not.
You're
So
close.
close. How do we pronounce it?
The anglicized version that I go by is Sechrist.
Seacrest,
Sechrist.
like
Yeah,
Ryan Seacrest.
like Ryan Sechrist. Yeah, it was a very obscure name until American Idol, and then ever since American Idol, everybody's like, oh, like Ryan Sechrist. And I'm like, yep, like that.
That shows that we all watch too much TV. But
Hmm.
anyway, we are joined by Drew Seacrest. He is the CEO and co-founder of Connect the Dots. Thank you so much for joining us, Drew. And we'd love to learn a little bit more about you if you want to give us a quick introduction
Yeah,
into who you are.
sure. Sandra and Aisha, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Yeah, let's see. I'm a Pennsylvania Dutch boy, as compared to you, Sandra. You're a Dutch girl, just a
A
straight up Dutch
Dutch
girl.
girl.
Yeah. But I grew up in Pennsylvania. I don't know if you're familiar with the term Pennsylvania Dutch, but it actually came from Pennsylvania Deutsch, which meant it was a bunch of German farmers who moved to Pennsylvania centuries ago. And I'm the descendant of some of those folks. So I grew up in Pennsylvania and technically Swiss. They're a Swiss German family that settled in Pennsylvania. Grew up there, went to college down south in North Carolina, and then I think relevant for this conversation, in one of my early jobs after work, after college rather, in North Carolina, I sent a cold email to this guy named Marc Benioff, who had just left Oracle and was starting a company called Salesforce.com. This was in 1999. And I cold called him and said, Mark, I'd like to resell your product when you're ready to bring it to market. And I had read about what Mark was doing in the Wall Street Journal. So Salesforce was very small at that point, but it was part of this big trend, which we now call SaaS, right? But they didn't have a term called SaaS back then. They called it ASP, Application Service Provider. And so there's an article in the Wall Street Journal about application service provider companies that were starting up. And one example was Marc Benioff leaving Oracle with $2 million from Larry Ellison to start this thing called Salesforce.com. Ooh, that sounds great. I think that's what the world needs. So cold emailed Marc Benioff. Mark got back to me very quickly and said they were not going to have a reseller network, which meant we were not, we could not end up becoming a reseller for Salesforce because there's not going to be such a concept. But he said, fly out to San Francisco and let's talk. And so I did. I flew out to San Francisco, met with Mark, and explained to him, I understood what he was trying to accomplish. I thought it was brilliant because the job that I was working on in North Carolina at the time, we were implementing client server software that CRM systems, client server CRM systems. And there was just the architecture was just bad. Client server for CRM systems was really bad. So I knew that this way that Mark had sketched out, this idea of Salesforce.com being an application that runs in your browser on your computer and you don't have to install any software. I knew it was brilliant. So I explained that to him, and Mark's like, "Okay, you're hired." That was it. It was actually in some ways you guys are in HR recruiting. It was like the worst recruiting process ever. Like like after 3 minutes he offered me a job. And I was like, how
I
could you
mean, you did cold
possibly
call him, which I think is amazing.
Yeah.
Like that shows real sales experience there, or at least want.
Well, it should desire for sure. I don't know about experience because I didn't really have any experience, not much at that point. But yeah, in retrospect, I'd be like, gosh, not a very good hiring process if I got through it with that. But it turned out great for both of us. I mean, Salesforce turned out really well, and I ended up being I was there for 10 years, and I was the top producer as an individual contributor, and then later as a manager, I was the top producer globally as a manager. So apparently my lack of experience didn't prevent those things from happening. So it all worked out well in the end. And so after 10 years, I finally said, okay, I don't think my destiny is to be in a lifer at Salesforce. Although it was very tempting, to be honest, because we're making a lot of money at that point. The company was just growing, growing, growing. And it was a fun company. Mark sets a great culture, and my friends were there, and so it was hard to leave, but I left and I started a company. I cut my teeth as an entrepreneur, and Just very briefly, it was a company called Kuzu. Long story short, we never got the product market fit. So I ended up, after about 3.5 years of raising $2.5 million, I think, and building a team partially in Belgrade, Serbia, we ended up shutting the company down. And so I had my first hard entrepreneurial lesson. And but it was great because I got to cut my teeth as an entrepreneur. I learned a lot. I also got exposed to Belgrade, Serbia, which was a great place. We built an engineering team there. One of my co-founder in the company was actually a Serbian guy who was based in San Francisco, but we went to Serbia and built an engineering team, and it was great. So I got to know Serbia, which has served me quite well over time, including Sandra and Ayse. I just mentioned right before this that I just got married, we just got married this year, and my wife is Serbian. So
No way.
being exposed to Serbia meant that I was exposed to my wife, my now wife, and so that was great. Very thankful for that.
Meant to be.
Yes, it was. And then also, I just built a great network in Serbia and Belgrade, and really enjoyed spending time there. And so when starting this new company, Connect the Dots, a few years ago, I knew that I wanted to have some sort of presence in Belgrade. And so one of my co-founders is actually a guy named Luka. He was a Serbian guy that I knew from my first experience, my first go-around. So he's one of my co-founders, and then two other co-founders from the Bay Area, Canadian guy and another American guy. And so we started the company together, and we've been happily entrepreneuring ever since and building Connect the Dots. So that is my very long-winded introduction. I'm not sure if you wanted less or more, but that's how much I just delivered to you.
No, I love that. I have so many questions. I already said to Drew ahead of time, I was like, how much can I talk about Salesforce? Because I'm obsessed. I'm a huge fan, of course, because I do marketing for, B2B SaaS companies I've had for a while. And that's, the company. I mean, everyone knows Salesforce. They have a huge brand, huge presence. They're such innovators. I want to know everything. I mean, being employee number 6 and also just like cold calling him.
36.
36,
yeah,
yes.
36. Still early, but not.
I mean, 36. And just cold calling him, and then even being able to say, so I got on the phone with Marc. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people can say that now, that they can get on the phone with Marc, which is amazing. And they're just calling him Marc, which I'm like, the founder of Salesforce.
He wasn't quite he wasn't nearly as big a deal back then. He was still a pretty impressive guy, but he was a much easier guy to get a hold of.
I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sure. So what was the early experience? You said you got hired rather easily, right? What was the early experience when you got there? Was there any onboarding? Was it just like, let's see what you could do today? Or was there any structure?
Yeah. I mean, I still remember it quite well, what it was like, because it was a whole new world for me. I'd flown out from the East Coast. I really hadn't spent much time on the West Coast at all. It was kind of this fantasy land. I knew all about San Francisco and Silicon Valley as this place where the world was changing, and I definitely wanted to be part of it, but I didn't know much about it. And so when I joined, we were in a little office, not too little. It was actually like bigger than we had employees to fill at that point, in downtown San Francisco. And when I came in for my first day, I got paired with basically a buddy, somebody who had been there longer than me, which was everybody, which was one of 35 people. It was a guy named Eric Mall, who's still a really good friend of mine today. And Eric was he was either the first or second sales hire at Salesforce. He and this other guy named Pete Worcester hotly debate who was the first one hired. One was hired first, but then the other one showed up at the office first. And so anyway, I don't know I don't know how they ever resolved that dispute or if it ever will be resolved. But so I got matched up with Eric, and I'm like, okay, what do we do? He's like, well, I'll show you what we're doing right now. And so basically the product was up and running. Salesforce was up and running. Very, 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 very basic. It's like, if you live in Salesforce at all, it had a homepage, accounts, contacts, opportunities. That was probably it. There might have been tasks, or like tasks that would sit underneath accounts and contacts. I think that was it. I don't think we had a reporting tab yet, or I don't know if we had anything else. That was it. So we were giving it away. So basically, Eric and Peter had been hired, and me too, to give it away. So this was 1999. I think the physics of Silicon Valley back in 1999 were a little weird. It was, everybody was thinking about eyeballs, meaning like how many people can you get to look at your website? That's all that anybody cared about. They didn't care about monetizing. They cared about eyeballs. How many eyeballs are on our website? And we were like, well, we're probably not. We're probably going to care about people paying us eventually, but for now, we just want people to get their eyeballs on our website and use it. And so we were just tasked with giving the product away and getting people to use it and give us feedback. And so Eric showed me what that looked like. Like, here's what we do. Here's what we, basically finding people to sell this free thing to. And here's how we do it. And we're making these calls. And so it was really, really, really basic onboarding. My first boss was a lady named Shelley Duvall, who I think later she was married, and she's Shelley Davenport, or maybe I got it the other way around. Yeah, originally Shelley Duvall. And she basically was like, sit down with Eric and you guys, see what Eric's doing. And that was it. It was like learning through osmosis, but we're just giving stuff away. So it wasn't that serious. And back in 1999, everybody had a lot of cash. VCs had thrown a lot of money at companies like Salesforce. So we had time to just kind of give it away for a couple of months. And then the market corrected dramatically. And then we had to start selling. And but that was my onboarding experience was very like sit with somebody who's been here for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I don't know, maybe a month or something, and then learn from him, and that was it. Now, much later, we ended up doing things like boot camps. So probably like a year later, I don't know. This is a long time ago. This is like back in 2000 or 2001. We put formal structure in place, and then people who got hired in had a boot camp experience where Marc would come in and explain the vision and company culture, and then you'd have the different heads of the different organizations come in and you go through a specific curriculum. But that was not my experience. My first experience was like, all right, welcome. Here's a computer and here's your buddy. Learn what you can and good luck.
I kind of love that more though, because you really got the real experience before it was all routine. So you talked about, afterwards when there was more hiring, there was a more formalized process. What did hiring look like at Salesforce back then?
Well, like when I just joined, so I was not super atypical of what was happening at Salesforce when I joined. The one thing that was atypical was I think everybody knew somebody at the company. I think I was quite possibly the very first person at the company that nobody knew, because I just came in out of left field from North Carolina. So I think all 35 other people who were there, like, Marc and then 3 co-founders, they knew people, and then they hired those people from having worked with them at Oracle and stuff like that. And then those people knew people. So then they were like, hey, I know somebody who could be really good at, a good engineer for this, or, a good product marketing person or whatever. And so they just kept growing through word of mouth, and referring in each other's friends and, former colleagues and stuff. It actually worked out great because, that's a great filter. It is, because if you want to work with somebody again, says something, right? You worked together successfully in the past, but it taps out at a certain point when you get, you're trying to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's harder to do that. Well, actually, I mean, maybe it never really taps out. We can talk about that later. My company might help that never tap out in the future. But that's a little foreshadowing. But yeah, what we did do, we put in place bonuses for anybody who would refer somebody in for a role. And I don't remember what it was, but it was, in the thousands of dollars range. And it was meaningful, for those of us who are kids who are.
I mean, in the early 2000s, if you say, I mean, even now, thousands of dollars, I wouldn't say no.
Yeah, me neither. I'll take thousands of dollars if somebody's going to offer it to me. So I remember it was a big deal. Like if you could get refer somebody in who got hired and it was $2,000 or $3,000, like that's your rent check for the month,
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. So we did that, scaled that up, and yeah. What else can I tell you about that, Sandra?
No, that's really interesting. And I kind of want to lean in to what you said. You knew nobody. You were the only one there who knew nobody. Because I know a bunch of our listeners, and also just generally like people who are trying to get into the world of tech, something they run into is say, we have no connections. I have no network in tech. I don't know how to break into tech.
Yeah.
And I feel like what a lot of the people we've interviewed have in common is they kind of just went for it without connections. You just made a cold call, you know what I mean? Like they just
Yes.
go for it. So maybe let's talk about that a little bit, and maybe also from your experience there and how you made that happen to the people you work with today. Like, what is something that someone can do today who wants that type of career and entry?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I experienced this myself too, because I was a complete outsider. I was the outsider at Salesforce because everybody else basically came from Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
They had already kind of gotten baptized into Silicon Valley. And I think about that. I think I use the term baptize a lot, even though I'm, not in a religious term, but just like, how do you break in? How do you become one of the people that becomes considered for all these roles?
Hmm.
And I think about this a lot too, because like I have a lot of friends and connections now around the planet. I'm kind of a global nomad. I spend a lot of time outside the country, specifically Serbia, but not just Serbia. And like, how do you break in and become somebody that's like, oh, that resume, I got it. The connections, I'm going to consider this person. Because you can be a very smart, accomplished, high potential person. But if you somebody scans your resume and they're like, I don't recognize any of this stuff, it's like, the filters that you're gone, right?
Yeah.
And that's one filter. There's another filter, which is, how did I find out about this person? So if
Yeah.
somebody that I know and trust recommends the person, then their resume matters a lot less, right? Like I'm willing to like, okay, I don't recognize any of these schools or companies that this person has been at, but Jerry really recommends them highly, and I really trust Jerry. So okay, that person made it past the filter. So there, two different angles here. One is like I had a when I was doing my first company after Salesforce, Kuzu, I had this really incredibly smart, really great to work with woman who was a like part time doing like finance and paralegal work for us. She was amazing, and her name's Anya. And but Anya was from Russia, and she had gone to a really great school in Russia, and she's clearly like very very bright, but she was having a tough time finding good jobs in Silicon Valley. But I was like, she's super high potential. And one of the things that she ended up doing, and I encourage her to do this for sure, was she went back to get an MBA, and she got into Berkeley. And so that she was kind of baptized after that. She has an MBA from a school that everybody recognized. She had worked in some startup companies at that point, none of which were like big breakout successes, but Berkeley helped her kind of become baptized in that way. And then she did the other thing. She tapped me and said, "Hey, I'm interested in this role at Salesforce. Can you make a recommendation for me?" And I was like, without any doubt, I'd recommend her. So I recommended her, and she got a job. And I think she was there for like a good decade, and became a senior exec, and had a great career. So two things there. One is like she got into a there is an unconscious we're not it's not it's a conscious bias. Like when you're hiring, you're like, I don't recognize any of these schools or any of these companies. I'm like, how do I even
Yeah.
evaluate this person? I don't know what to think about this person. So she addressed one of those by going to, a great US school. And then the other thing is, she got filtered into Salesforce via me. And I knew a lot of people at Salesforce I could introduce her to, and I felt very confident to do it. So that's how she did it. I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned in what she did. Worked out great for her. In my case, trying to break into a hot startup in Silicon Valley and not knowing anybody, if you're going after a go-to-market executive who's the senior leader like Marc Benioff, they respect the hustle.
Yeah.
So, Mark respected that I just went for it, and all the way through to like fly out to San Francisco and let's talk. So, not every executive is going to be like that. Not every go-to-market executive is going to respond to you. Don't delude yourself and think that's going to be the case. But if you have a good ask, my ask was good, I think too. When I pinged Mark, it's like, hey, you're going to market. We resell companies like yours, but there's nothing like yours, and so we'd like to do it. So it should have been pretty intriguing. It was a real value proposition. It's not one that fit with their strategy, but it wasn't just a kind of like, hey, I'd like a job, email, which I didn't at that point. Like I guess the luck of this thing was I wasn't contacting Mark with the intention of getting a job, but then that's what popped up, and I was like, ooh, that looks even better. I'll take it. I'll take the job.
It's funny. So we previously interviewed Monday.com's first salesperson, their very first sales hire, who didn't even start at the company as, a salesperson. They started in customer success. He was with the company from Series A to IPO, and he actually said that he was shocked how few people cold called him for sales jobs, and that he said people should more often. So it is very interesting to hear that from you as well. Would you respond well if people are like, "Oh, I want to get in contact with Drew"? Would you respond well if they cold called you?
Yeah, totally. But I never pick up a phone call that I don't recognize the number for anymore. So I don't really understand how cold calls work. Like a literal cold call. Who picks up their phone if they don't recognize the number? Do you guys?
I do. I should know this. I get so many a day. I get them constantly. The reason I pick up is I have 2 kids. And you never know if it's them. And coincidentally, I got a call today from the nurse's office that my son was sick and had to be picked up. So I'm very glad I picked up the call. I immediately saved the number, but it was a different number from last time. Yeah. So I always pick up the call. And I think somewhere I'm marked very green, and it says she will pick up the phone. So just keep calling. And if you miss her, just try again the next day. So I'm the idiot that still picks up the call. And
you keep the cold calling industry alive.
I know, personally, I do.
Like you that keep it alive.
So that's a tip for cold callers. Target moms. You just have to target moms.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's so sad. But yeah, no, I pick up, and I don't love them. I posted about it on LinkedIn before, where I was like, what is a polite way to hang up the phone? Because usually when I pick up too, I'm like in a meeting or something. And it's like the politest way to be like, please, I need to hang up now. You are not anyone connected to my child, so I'm going to hang up now. But yeah, I did also see that you did make an art of cold calling. So you think the cold calling industry is dead, but you used to be a big fan.
Yeah. I think it was a tool in your toolkit as a seller, and you should use all the tools available to you, and you should use the ones that work the best, the most. But so early on at Salesforce, we cold called for sure, did a lot of that. World was very different then. Very, very different. I mean, there's just no way to get in. Like, there's no real way that most of us could figure out how to get into a company or a person without doing a bunch of cold calling. World's changed a lot. LinkedIn exists now. It didn't exist back then. So LinkedIn is kind of like the global directory of all people on the planet. So you can ping them on LinkedIn, and that's cold, but you can get to them, or not that they'll necessarily read it. And the thing that's, I think, moving. This is the thing that we've dedicated ourselves to at Connect the Dots. World's moving towards leveraging relationships to be able to break through that filter. And, just like we were talking about Anya, when she was trying to get into Salesforce, she kind of got baptized into Silicon Valley by going to Berkeley. And then she got a warm intro from me into trusted hiring managers at Salesforce. And then that was it. She was set up for success, right? That worked out great. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't possible to be able to scale up your relationships in the past to be able to get into all the companies you're trying to get to. And it is now. And that's actually what we do at Connect the Dots. So I'm not going to plug my company.
No, please do. Literally, the next question on my list was, what exactly does Connect the Dots do for everyone who doesn't know? So I love that you got there already.
If you really must ask,
we do.
It would be rude of me not to answer. So we are the best way for you individually and for you collectively as a company to leverage your network of real relationships, the people that you really know and have familiar or strong relationships with, to figure out how to get the warm introductions directly to the people that you want to meet. And we're primarily focused on helping people sell. So if you're a B2B company that has a B2B sales organization, then we're definitely for you. You need this. This is the way. This is, instead of the old cold calling way, which it was the way that you had to do things 25 years ago when I reached out to Marc Benioff. It's not the way that you have to do things anymore. It's actually not that as effective, because people, we have caller ID now, and if you don't recognize the number, most people don't pick it up. And even if they do pick it up, do they really want to talk to you? And the whole problem goes away if you get filtered in through a trusted person that is the person who knows both of you and says, like I said, Sandra, I see that you know Jeannie Smith, who is the CMO at the company that we want to reach, and you know what we do, and you know Jeannie really well. I can see that you know Jeannie well. Would you mind making an introduction to me? Because I like to talk to her about how we at Connect the Dots could help her. And you might not say yes. You might say, Jeannie doesn't like to take
I'll
that type of
always say yes.
introduction.
If you ask Drew, I'll always say yes.
Beautiful. Well, Sandra, then this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship. And vice versa. I mean, if it makes sense, I'm always happy to make introductions for other people. I think that's part of what makes you successful in doing this type of thing in the world is you got to kind of pay it forward, and you have to know that you might pay it forward so that 90% of the value accrues to other people in the world, and you just get the 10% because you're making like 90% of the introductions and you're only asking for 10%. But that's fine. That's a great world. We should all live in a world like that. And but that's the thing that Connect the Dots does. Connect the Dots makes it really easy to see that, Sandra, the person I'm trying to get to, and then I can ask you for the warm introduction. We cut through all the noise. That person says, sure, I'm happy to talk to Drew based on your recommendation, Sandra. And that's it. So we're focused on helping sellers do that, but it's also applicable to any reason that you would want to meet somebody. So if you're fundraising or hiring or looking for a job or any of those things are applicable. So there you go. That is what we do.
How do you see the difference between people I'm connected to and people I actually know? Is it through like the engagements in my inbox or my CRM?
Great question. So we all leave a digital trace as we go through the world now. So, you're constantly communicating with other people. You two are on email threads with each other, probably lots of them. I'm on, some of those email threads with you as we were organizing this podcast. Each of those communications it's a digital exhaust. It's a trace of a relationship. And the more there's a pile up over time, the more these two people clearly know each other. So what Connect the Dots does is actually reverse engineer all these relationships by analyzing all of the historical data about the communication between and among each other. So if Sandra and Ayse have emailed back and forth a bunch over the course of the past 7 years across multiple companies, across multiple email accounts, when you're both at the same company before, and then we went to a different company, and then you brought Ayse with you, and you've got your personal communications too. Like all of that goes into this analysis that says you two have a strong relationship. And so if anybody's trying to get to one of you via the other, it's a home run. Like Ayse can definitely get you to Sandra, no question about it.
She would, no questions asked. She'd be like, here she is.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Drew's a little bit, and Drew's a little new to the mix, right? Like I don't know you two as well as you guys know each other, but you can see that there's a new relationship, but there's enough to it that it's a familiar path, and somebody could ask Drew to get to Ayse, and that might work. So versus on LinkedIn, you're connected to somebody and it's just binary. It's like connect or you're not connected. And I'm not sure what your LinkedIn hygiene is like, but for most people, it's probably about 10% of the people that they're connected to, they actually know, or that they know well enough that they could actually leverage that relationship. And that is a terrible ratio. That ratio is so bad that it's fatiguing for everybody trying to leverage it, trying to figure out how they can, how do I navigate these people? I don't even know most of these people that look like they're the common connection to the person I'm trying to get to. And then the person that you ask, they've got the same problem. They're like, yeah, that's one of the 90% of the people I don't know that I am, that I'm connected to on LinkedIn. So this is just a complete waste of everybody's time. So we solve that problem completely by just showing the strong paths in that people can leverage to get, via Ayse to Sandra. That type of thing.
That's really interesting. And even within my career, I've seen that completely change on LinkedIn. Like back in the day, we'd only be connected to people we actually knew we could make introductions to. So within a few years, it just went completely berserk. And that's how people started selling. And everyone was suddenly connected to everyone. Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah, it was better early. When LinkedIn first came out, it was they were really kind of hardcore about it too. They were like, hey, only connect to people that you've met in real life. I remember that was their guidance,
Was it really?
Yeah. Yeah. And then they just kind of started. So LinkedIn changed a lot because, LinkedIn's like definitely the world's greatest business media platform now. I don't think there's any question about it. It's absolutely amazing, but it comes at a cost. The cost is everybody's trying to aggregate as many connections as possible now. It's like a game, and that game makes it so that it's just not useful for figuring out how do you navigate your network to actually get to the people you want to get to?
No, that makes sense. And I also find it really interesting about your digital footprint because nothing you actually delete actually stays away forever. And a bit of a tangent here, but I think it's noteworthy for sales as well as for your digital footprint. I've had someone, I forget even what company they're from, which I should remember, a salesperson reach out to me, and Aisha already knows this story. They were really desperately wanted to sell to me, and they tried to do it via LinkedIn, and they kept messaging me, and suddenly they emailed me something that was super personalized about something like your favorite coffee shop. I'll get you a gift card to your favorite coffee shop, but it's like a niche coffee shop that no one would know that I used to write about on a blog that no longer existed. No longer existed, was no longer live. I'd taken the website offline. And I'm like, what the hell? How does this person know I like this coffee shop? Like, I haven't talked about it in years. And where I did talk about it is offline. So I go back and I'm like, how did you find out about this? He goes, well, there was this, I found your private Twitter where I have like 5 tweets. And one of them linked to an old website that was offline. So I took that website that is no longer online, put it in whatever program, found your old website, then browsed through my old website to what I enjoyed, which was coffee, still is. I have a coffee here right now. And found the coffee shop I liked, and then took that information to reach out to me. And I know this person thought that would be super successful, but I just felt like such an invasion of privacy that I literally was like, this wildly creeps me out. I cannot do business with you, but thank you for letting me know that my digital footprint is forever on the internet and will never be gone. But trust me, don't do this again because I will never work with you because that is creepy.
It reminds me of I went to an event one time where there was like a medium, somebody who could commune with the dead.
Oh, wonderful.
And you know, I'm an open-minded guy. Sure.
Like no judgment.
Yeah. I'm like, I was not the organizer of this event, right? So I
love it.
I found myself at this event. And so I'm an open-minded guy, you know, I'm like, okay, fine.
Why not?
Let's see what you got. Let's see what you got. Tell me about the dead people you're talking to and
I can't.
And what they're saying. And so the medium brought up my grandmother, deceased grandmother. And she mentioned that she said something that your grandma is here with her dog, and the dog's name is like Shadow or something. And I was like, I don't really remember a dog named Shadow. And it was like, that was the anchor point. It was like, it was the proof that there's communing with the dead was happening. And I was like, well, I don't know Shadow, but maybe grandma had a dog named Shadow. I don't know. So I asked my mom after that. My mom's like, I think they had a dog named Shadow before my mom was born. Like, way before I was born, way before my mom was born. But she's like, you would have never known that dog. You know, I'm like, I didn't, my mom didn't know that dog. And then I found there's this service that you can subscribe to, you got to pay for it, that has old newspaper clippings that go back to the beginning of time. And there is an article about my grandma and grandpa back in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and they had a dog named Shadow. And it was like, it's the only reference, but it's online. And so I felt equally creeped out, but in a different way. And I was like, yeah, I think I've had enough of this.
Wow. I don't know whether to applaud them for doing their homework or to just be like, please stop. That is horrible.
Probably both, you know?
And they just assume you'll be impressed, but oh my God.
Yeah, well, we digress. We're definitely off topic here, but it reminded me of you being creeped out by your coffee shop and me being creeped out by grandma's dog Shadow. Yes.
I think it's still a lesson. Yeah. I think there's a lesson here. You can go too far. Like there is a lesson. You can go too far. Yes.
Don't pull up creepy little factoids about people and then pretend that you know me really well. Like that's not going to land well.
No, definitely not. And I think whether that's in sales or, recruitment, trying to get a job, there is such a thing as going too far. Like don't completely stalk their private life. and then try to talk to them about it. But again, do some research. There's a fine balance.
Definitely do research.
There's a fine balance there, but maybe don't know, what school my children go to. Fine balance.
Yeah.
So that, I think, now we've kind of gone back into recruitment. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about hiring. I know we love going off on tangents here on Beyond the Hire. But let's bring it back to recruitment now. So we obviously work together. For those that don't know, we work together with Drew at Betts Recruiting. So when you're looking for talent, right? And this is why I really wanted to talk to you about, like, let's lean in when you know nobody, and how should you get connected. Now that you're in a position, and I know you already were at Salesforce, to make hires, what do you specifically look for in talent? And in your opinion, what can people do to stand out?
Yeah. We're at a specific phase in our growth, and so I'm looking for certain things now, and that will change over time. But we're hiring kind of based on the profile that I think Marc was hiring for back in 1999 when he hired me, and it was, I would say, probably relatively early in, and this is shifting a little bit for us, but and this is specific to us, relatively early in their career, but high potential. And we're hiring like account executives and CSMs, and that's what Betts is helping us with. So the grit is really important. Grit, tenacity, and all the proof points that somebody's got grit and tenacity. We're early to market with our product. This is not like, we're not Salesforce or some company that's been around for a long time and has hundreds or thousands of AEs. So when you're in that early phase of a company's go-to-market motion, there's just a lot of stuff with your product that's like, things are just not completely done. The product's not completely baked in every single way. So you got to understand what it's like to work in that environment. Salesforce, when I started there, the product was super, super basic, right? But it was like the core thing that it did was great. Yeah. But we wanted it to do all these other things. It's not doesn't do them yet. When give us time, we'll build it out. So for us, I've been looking for proof points that somebody can work in that environment, that they know what that's like. The other part of that is in a company, we've got, call it 60 people in our company. If you got 60 people in your company instead of 10,000 or 80,000, there aren't people to do a lot of things. Yeah. So you got to be able to do it yourself. One of the things I really liked about some of the early stories of Jeff Bezos, where he was growing up and spent a lot of time, I think, on a farm in Texas with his grandpa, I believe. And there's just a lot of stuff that they didn't have people to help with stuff. So, they would have to build stuff, do it themselves all the time. And I think that mentality where it's like, oh, we need a nail and we don't have one. Well, here we can actually make do with this thick piece of wire. We can hammer it straight and turn it into a nail so we can, accomplish this thing we have to do on the ranch right now. And that's kind of gold, when you're at this phase of a company. It's like people who are just like, I see a problem and I can figure out what the hack solution is to this, because nobody else is going to help me. Like we don't have 80,000 people to help solve this problem. So, those are some really critical things. Being articulate and clear in thought, really important. Being able to articulate yourself well, that's really, really important in life in general.
Yes.
So that's incredibly important for us. And then also being able to listen very well, and being a proactive, engaged listener. For our go-to-market motion, those are things that matter a lot. We also like people so we're increasingly hiring some people that have a bit more experience. We're kind of like creeping up into experienced hires from early, like earlier, kind of call them young and hungry hires. And so people have got relevant experience, and they have a point of view on it. Like, this industry needs to change in this way because we've been suffering so much. And I see how, in our case, I see how Connect the Dots is really going to solve that problem. That was one of the things that I think made me so successful at Salesforce, was I knew the pain of the old way of doing things in the CRM world. And that was crystal clear to me. Like, nobody had to tell me why this is better. I was like, I am 100% clear about why this is better. So when you find people like that who are like, I am 100% clear why this is better. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I don't have to be sold as as a potential employee. I am 100% sold. That's awesome, because those people oftentimes tend to be on like a mission. It's not just a job for them. It's like, there's a problem with the universe and we need to go fix it. And, you know, it's only those of us who have got the vision that can go do it. Like when you find somebody like that, that's a great hire.
Amazing. And yeah, it is definitely a trend we've been seeing a lot, where people are making industry specific hires across the board. Besides, obviously, if you're, you know, an earlier stage company, those high potentials with grit. We're about out of time, but there's a few more questions. I'll at least ask one more, because we now know kind of your hiring turn-ons, which is, you know, a good listener. What is then a turn off? And obviously, a bad listener would be a turn off, or someone who researches, maybe your wife, would be a turn off, you know? But what else would be a turn off?
Yeah. Well, I mean, not doing research. I don't even call. Let's not have a first conversation if you haven't done your research. Like if you don't know our product, and our product's something anybody can sign up for. You know, you can go to our website and you can actually create an account and play with it. And if you don't do that and you're interviewing with us, then we shouldn't be having a conversation. You know, that's not a good use of my time or our team's time. So do your research is probably, you know, it's a turn on and it's a complete turn off when it doesn't get done.
Yeah, actually, fun story. I for my previous company, the one where I worked with Ayse, I knew I was interviewing for the company and I really liked it. So I ended up downloading a bunch of their content, and I ended up, for some reason, becoming a prospect. So I got so many cold calls, and I was like, I'm interviewing with you guys. You don't want to sell to me. I was like, block me in your CRM, because I was downloading all the content. But I remember being super self-conscious about it, because I'm like, they're all going to see my name popping up and they're going to think I'm so eager. At the time, I was really self-conscious about it.
I did not know that, by the way. I had no idea. Very funny.
That was the company that you two were both at? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think you did exactly the right thing.
Amazing. So kind of, because again, the goal here of the podcast is how industry leaders got to where they are today. And I think for you, a big start of that was kind of putting yourself out there, going for it, and making yourself available to opportunity, and then being an entrepreneur and not being afraid to fail, and then just starting again, if I can summarize it like that. And please tell me if I'm wrong. Is there any final like wisdom or words of advice you can give to people who listen to this, or you know, have looked you up on LinkedIn and think that's the kind of career I would love to have, especially, you know, working for an insane company like Salesforce and then being able to become an entrepreneur?
I mean, lots of things I could say, but if you really want to work for a great company, I think that's a great way to get your start in the world, is be in a great company and then learn what there is to learn from that, and then pivot around from that direction, figure out, okay, what else in the world can I now go, what problems can I go solve now that I have this you know, specific experience under my belt. So I would say, you know, pick something that you're passionate about and then work like hell to get into the best company in that space, so that you're surrounded by the best people and you see what good looks like. You see what great looks like. Because then you can take that and do whatever you want. You can go to the next company, or you can start your own thing, and you have everything that you need. So that's my advice.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Drew, for being on the Beyond the Hire podcast. And we'll make sure everything is linked so people can go give you a follow on LinkedIn, you know, because we're connected with everyone, not just people we know. But it'll be a great way for people to kind of see what you're up to, and go create an account or connect the dots, because anyone can do it. So you should too. But thank you so much for your time, Drew. I really, really appreciate this. And this was an amazing chat.
Sandra, Ayse, thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.